Hello and welcome to this video about objects in the data warehouse. Before I start, let me recap what we have learned till now. You have gone through the introduction courses telling you about SAP and business intelligence. You have also had an introduction to the data warehouse and its components. So now we are about to start going into more detail so you can understand the functions of the data warehouse and how you can administer it. First, we have to take a look at the objects in the data warehouse. The first object, which is a very important one, is called InfoProviders. And as you can infer from the name, they provide data for reports. This is the access point where the reports come in and get the information to display. The data can either be stored physically, or we can have a combination of different InfoProviders to form a view. In this case, the data is not stored physically in the InfoProvider. So there are two types of InfoProviders. The first one is called the InfoCube, and the second is called the Data Store Object, a DSO in short. An InfoCube is used to store summarized data for long periods of time, and this can be in years. Data Store Object, on the other hand, is used to temporarily store data, and this is more detailed data. This can be in the form of a snapshot for last year's sales figures, for example. So let me use real-world examples to explain what kinds of data is stored. So for example, let us say we are a company, right, and we have a customer called John Smith. We would have John's details in our database, and we will store his name John and his last name Smith in a table. So let's say John comes along and buys a phone from us. We would also store the information of that purchase in our database, the price and model of the phone purchased. Last thing we would have to store is the date when John purchased the information. So all this information, the name, the product model, and the date, is the kind of information that would be stored in an InfoProvider. And imagine if we have the same info for thousands of customers buying thousands of products. We can present a lot of reports to the user. Reports like best performing products or most responsive customer, for example. So that is it for this small introduction of InfoProviders. We shall be using this object heavily in later lessons, so this is not the last you will hear of it. So now I will show you a screencast of the SAP GUI, where you shall see where InfoProviders are created and how they are used. So here we are at the data warehousing workbench. On the left hand side here, you will see a modeling tab, and under that you have the objects in the data warehouse which you can actually use to carry out modeling. So here we are interested in the InfoProvider. If you click on that to select it, you will see a list of InfoProviders. Well, actually these are info areas present in the system. Info areas are basically just folders under which we store InfoProviders. If you want to create an InfoProvider, first of all we have to create an info area. So we right click on the title and select Create Info Area. So here we can give a technical name for our info area. Let's call it ZI area, for example. And let's choose the description as Demo Info Area. We accept that. So now if you see here at the bottom, our demo info area has been created. So at this point, we can also create our info provider. If you right click on the info area, you have some options which you can choose. So you can create an InfoCube or create a DSO. These are other info providers which we can create. So for now, let us create an InfoCube. So first off, we have to type in the technical name for the InfoCube. Let's call that ZI Cube, and a description for that. Let's call it Demo InfoCube. We can copy the structure from a different info provider, but for now, let us leave that blank. And then we can leave the default settings as it is. This is a standard InfoCube, for example. And then we click on Create. So now we can see on the left hand side the properties of the InfoCube. Here we will be able to add info objects that make up our InfoCube by clicking here for our info object catalog. But for now we do not have any info objects to add. We shall do that in a later video. The dimensions or characteristics will be shown here on the left hand side, and the key figures here as well. But as you see, they are empty. So the next step is to save this info area. So first of all, we'll do a check and activate. But this check is not going to succeed because we do not have any info objects. As you see here, to tell us, please create at least one characteristic or one key figure info object. So we shall create info objects in a later video, and then I can also show how we can create our info providers from these info objects. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.